appropriate the sum of $4,070 to fund the FY 2000 Finance Committee budget as specified on lines 3 and 4 as printed in the sponsor recommended column of the warrant.
You've heard the motion. Does the Finance Committee have a recommendation? Mr. Burton.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. The Finance Committee obviously endorses this one.
Does the Board of Selectmen have a recommendation? Mr. Vino.
The Board of Selectmen recommend.
Is there any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Unanimous. Mr. Jones.
Mr. Moderator, I move to raise and appropriate the sum of $110,000 and to fund $15,000 from water revenue for a total of $125,000 to fund the reserve fund as specified on line 5, printed in the sponsor recommended column of the warrant.
You've heard the motion. Does the Finance Committee have a recommendation? Mr. Burton.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. The Finance Committee recommends. This, by the way, is one of the funds that is used at the discretion of the Finance Committee to deal with emergencies as they come up throughout the year without having to come back to town meeting.
Does the Board of Selectmen have a recommendation? Mr. Vino.
The Board of Selectmen recommend.
Is there any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Unanimous. Mr. Vino.
Mr. Moderator, I move to raise and appropriate the sum of $130,000 and to fund $10,000 from water revenue for a total of $140,000 to fund the general insurance budget as specified on line 6 as printed in the sponsor recommended column of the warrant.
You've heard the motion. Does the Finance Committee have a recommendation? Mr. Jones.
Mr. Moderator, the Finance Committee recommends.
Does the Board of Selectmen have a recommendation? Mr. Vino.
The Board of Selectmen recommend.
Mr. Sylvia.
Could I just have an explanation of what general insurance is?
Mr. Sylvia would like to know what the item means. Mr. Jones, Mr. Dow.
That insurance is the insurance on the buildings and town vehicles.
Does not include health insurance.
I'm sorry?
Does not include health insurance.
Health insurance is included under pensions and benefits.
Any further discussion? Hearing none. On the motion for line item 6, all those in favor of $140,000, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Unanimous. Line 7. Mr. Vino.
Mr. Moderator, I move to raise and appropriate the sum of $102,000 and to fund from water revenue the sum of $8,000 for a total of $110,000 to fund the town council budget as specified on line 7 as printed in the sponsor recommended column of the warrant.
You've heard the motion. Does the Finance Committee have a recommendation? Mr. Jones.
Mr. Moderator, Finance Committee recommends.
Does the Board of Selectmen have a recommendation? Mr. Vino.
The Board of Selectmen recommend.
Is there any further discussion? Mr. Pasquale.
This would be one item. I favor the money. This would be one of the items under the article that I raised my hand about towns purchasing. See, all the towns, I would imagine, have towns council. We seem to be married into this one particular legal, since I've been standing up here at town meeting for 10 years, the same one, and I think we ought to go out and get some different bids from other law agencies.
Any further discussion? Hearing none. On the motion for $110,000, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Unanimous. Mr. Jones.
Mr. Moderator, I move to raise and appropriate the sum of $14,388 to fund the FY 2000 Selectmen budget as specified on line 8 as printed in the sponsor recommended column of the warrant.
You've heard the motion. Does the Finance Committee have a recommendation? Mr. Jones Sr.
Mr. Moderator, the Finance Committee recommends.
Does the Board of Selectmen have a recommendation? Mr. Vino.
The Board of Selectmen recommend.
Is there any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of $14,388, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Unanimous. Line 9. Mr. Vino.
Mr. Moderator, I move to raise and appropriate the sum of $186,694 and to fund $3,900 from water revenues for a total of $190,594 to fund the FY 2000 administration budget as specified on lines 9, 10, and 11 as printed in the sponsor-recommended column of the warrant.
You've heard the motion. Does the Finance Committee have a recommendation, Mr. Burke?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. The Finance Committee recommends and would also like to have you note item 11 here, which is one of the first places you will see a small capital item. This is part of the program that was started a couple of years ago and will continue. Thank you.
Does the Board of Selectmen have a recommendation, Mr. Vino?
The Board of Selectmen recommend.
Mr. Rowe, please state your name and address, sir.
Dana Rowe, 39 Willow Street. Where is all this water revenue? Is this our water bills? I thought that was supposed to be in one separate fund.
Mr. Jones, do you wish to answer Mr. Rowe's question?
Yes, the funding does come from the Water Enterprise Fund, and there's an allocation made for the amount of time that certain people within Town Hall spend on items associated with the Water Department. For instance, later on, you'll see the Finance Director, there's a certain portion of that salary funded from there based on the amount of time he does the accounting for the Water Department. It is charged against that enterprise account.
Gentleman in the aisle, please state your name and address, sir.
Anthony Salini, 28 Tower Hill Road. Just looking over, I may be not reading it properly, but on item 10, it seems to me, or if I'm reading it, that the department, the sponsor, finance, requested $66,000 approximately. Last year we spent, if I'm reading it correctly, around 56, but we are appropriating over 70,000. And I was just wondering why we were doing that if the requests all came in at 66.
Mr. Jones, to answer the question.
I think if you look, you'll discover that the $70,200 request was the FY99 budget, which would have been what was approved last year. The request this year was for $66,600, and that was the presentation that was made was accepted across the board. So it's actually a slight reduction over FY99, though an increase over FY98.
Okay, any further discussion on the motion before us? Mr. O'Brien, please state your name and address, sir.
Nick O'Brien, 95 Park Street. I don't know if the moderator will allow me to discuss this subject, but it is concerning salaries, and it involves the salary of the town administrator. Not too long ago, the Board of Selectmen, I guess in their wisdom, decided to give the town administrator an extended contract and 3 years automatic raises. I would ask if the raises are included in this particular salary line item number 9, and also ask a question concerning the procedure, that being giving the town administrator, not the person, but the position, an automatic raise every for 3 years. And my concern is that the Board of Selectmen many years ago established a policy, which was an evaluation policy on an annual basis, where the town administrator's performance was rated and he was paid accordingly. And if we're bypassing that particular system and allowing automatic raises every year by allowing it to come up for a 3-year period, I'm a little offended by that. I never once heard anybody waive policy for this to happen. I just know I read in the local paper, the transcript, that indeed this position was granted a 3-year contract with automatic raises, and that gives me a little bit of discomfort. I think the policy should be in place so that that position should be evaluated every year and a raise is accorded for that evaluation process. It motivates you to do a good job, to get an increase, and also let you know what your goals and objectives are that are put forth by the Board of Selectmen. If you don't meet those goals and objectives, you don't deserve a raise. I think that policy should be put back into effect. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
In answer to your question whether the chair will allow those questions to be raised, since they relate to the policy that leads to the financial motion before us, the chair will allow the question to be raised. Mr. Jones.
In response to Mr. O'Brien's statement, there's no automatic raises in the contract. There's no increase effective July 1st this year for the town administrator within the contract. So, if you'd like the town administrator, there's nothing for the next 3 years in place unless the Board of Selectmen decided to make an annual adjustment, but there's nothing pursuant to the contract in place as an automatic increase. That's just not the case, Mr. O'Brien. There's a length of contract, but it doesn't contain an automatic salary increase. Okay, that would be fine.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, the motion on line items 9, 10, and 11 is for $190,594. All those in favor, please say aye. Those opposed? Unanimous. Line item 12. I'm sorry, Mr. Jones, the town clerk tells me that you have a motion to admit to the meeting. If we're done with this line item, it might be appropriate to vote the individual.
Mr. Moderator, I move that the following person be admitted to the meeting: Greg Brown.
Mr. Greg Brown from Stoneham. On the motion to admit, is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Those opposed? Unanimous. Mr. Jones.
Mr. Moderator, I move to raise and appropriate the sum of $122,924 to fund the FY 2000 salary pool supplement budget as specified in line 12 as printed in the sponsor recommended column of the warrant.
Heard the motion. Does the Finance Committee have a recommendation? Mr. Jones Sr.
Mr. Moderator, the Finance Committee recommends, and if you will note, there is a jump from FY '99, and that's per my previous statement that there is some money included there for anticipated contract increases.
Does the Board of Selectmen have a recommendation? Mr. Vino.
The Board of Selectmen recommend.
Is there any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye. All those opposed? Unanimous. Line item 13.
Mr. Moderator,
Vino.
I move to raise and appropriate the sum of $38,007 to fund $4,700 from the water revenue for a total of $42,707 to fund the FY 2000 Finance Director budget as specified on line 13 as printed in the sponsor recommended column of the warrant.
You've heard the motion. Does the Finance Committee have a recommendation? Mr. Conry.
Mr. Moderator, the Finance Committee recommends.
Does the Board of Selectmen have a recommendation, Mr. Vino?
The Board of Selectmen recommend, Mr. Moderator.
Is there any further discussion? Hearing none. On the motion for $42,707. All those in favor, please say aye. Those opposed? Unanimous. Line 14.
Mr. Moderator, on lines 14 through 16, I move to raise and appropriate the sum of $112,615 and to fund $7,300 from water revenue for a total of $119,915 to fund the accounting budget as specified in lines 14 through 16 as printed in the sponsor recommended column of the warrant.
You've heard the motion. Does the Finance Committee have a recommendation, Mr. Britton?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. The Finance Committee recommends.
Does the Board of Selectmen have a recommendation, Mr. Vino?
Mr. Moderator, the Board of Selectmen recommend.
Is there any further discussion? Hearing none. On the motion for $119,915. All those in favor, please say aye. Those opposed? Unanimous. Mr. Vino.
Mr. Moderator, I move to raise and appropriate the sum of $125,690 to fund the assessing budget as specified on lines 17 through 19 as printed in the sponsor recommended column of the warrant.
Heard the motion. Does the Finance Committee have a recommendation? Mr. Jones, Senior.
Mr. Moderator, the Finance Committee recommends, you'll note that this is slightly down from last year, and because we're not reassessing this year.